There's also the Southern Great Plains chat, which stretches across 5 different states with habitat for the lesser prairie chickens. And this actually needs to be updated because as of Thursday, 2 of these state chats are online. New Mexico and Nevada have both launched their own state chats, and Oregon very soon will launch its state's chat. So again, I like to sort of think about the way that the state chat data, their individual chat data, is funneled and repackaged into this West-wide framework that's in the Western Governor's chat, the one on the right. This is also a good time to point out that people often ask why Arizona looks a little bit patchy here, and that's just because Arizona does not show tribal lands in the Map Arizona at this time. So to re-emphasize the point about it being a state-driven map, I like to hammer home the point that it's the state wildlife experts that decided which wildlife priorities to include in the tool. It's also a state-generated data and models that are included in those aggregated data layers. The habitat ranking scale, that 1 to 6 scale, has been set by state experts according to state priorities. And states are going to be the ones to regularly update the data in this tool. Of the chats in use, we already have some examples of how they've been useful for planning processes. The Southern Great Plains chat, that's the one that's specific to the lesser prairie chicken, was used in the range-wide plan by the 5 states that have worked together through an interstate working group to identify ways to conserve the species and preclude the need to list the species. And so in the range-wide plan, the Southern Great Plains chat is identified as the visual mechanism for enacting the work of that range-wide plan. And recently, Fish and Wildlife Service Director Dan Ash endorsed that plan as a means to conserve the species. Also, there's Map Arizona. Map has been around for a couple of years now, and it has been used by BLM for a restoration energy design project for the BLM office in that state. That project was designed to focus in on areas that would probably have the least conflict for siting new renewable energy development in Arizona, and using the rolled up crucial habitat data from Map Arizona, BLM was able to more quickly create their analysis on the wildlife perspective of project siting within that state. I'd also like to emphasize that the Western Governor's Wildlife Council has taken efforts to engage stakeholders on this project, and the Western Governor's Wildlife Council actually created a stakeholder advisory group back in 2010 to provide input on the development of chat. Those stakeholders included people from the conservation community, as well as the science community, the hunting and fishing community, the energy industry. All of those perspectives came together to inform the development of the chat, and those stakeholders are continuing to assist the Wildlife Council with communicating its work and helping spread the word about the chat now that it has been launched. I'd also like to emphasize that the Western Governor's Wildlife Council and the Western Governor's have really worked hard to build and maintain relationships with federal partners. Back in 2009, the Western Governors signed an MOU with the Secretaries of Agriculture, Energy, and the Interior, and that created a framework for the federal partnership around the development of a decision support system, which ultimately became the chat. Even though that MOU has now expired, we still have a really strong relationship with the federal partners, and in fact, Department of Interior Secretary Jewell was just at WGA's meeting last week and spoke about the importance and use of the chat tool as one of the ways that states and federal partners can work together for overall conservation and development goals on the landscape. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm about to turn it over to Artie Rodriguez from Oregon and give him the presenter status. Artie, would you like to go ahead?
Yes, thank you, Carly. As Carly said, I am the GIS analyst with the Oregon Conservation Strategy within the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And for the past year, I've also served as the Oregon Technical Lead for the CHAT project. And what we wanted to do in this part of the webinar is just kind of give a quick overview of the CHAT website and then also show an example of using the map for a conservation-related issue. So, Carly, can you see my screen okay?
Yes, looks good, Artie.
Okay, thanks. So this is the westgovchat.org, and as Carly said at the beginning of her talk, this is currently live and available. Everything I'm going to show you here is part of that public website. And to start off with, on the home page, you can see a series of navigational buttons up top that take you to various sections within the website. And then we also wanted to really focus on providing quick links to learn more about the project, go straight to the map, or get the data. We're going to start with learning more about CHAT. So if you go into the About section, and this follows this button up top here, we can see kind of a quick history of the CHAT and the project, a link to the Western Governors Wildlife Council white paper, which was a guiding document for this project. In the Help section, we get some details about how to use the mapping application, navigating, understanding the map components, how to work with the individual hexagons, sharing the map, and also accessing the data. And we'll hit on all of this during this demo here in a little bit. Frequently asked questions are some of the more common questions that we've been receiving as we've been putting this project together. They also might be some of the initial questions that you come across as you're using the site. If you don't find your answers in this site or in this part of the site or in Help or anywhere else, I just wanted to take a little bit of time to point out this feedback button. And here's where you can provide a comment or a question or suggestion for the CHAT site. We really view this as version 1 of CHAT and are really looking to make this as usable a product for as wide of community as possible. So please take advantage of this feature and let us know what you think, what works for you, or if you have any suggestions for how we might be able to improve things. Really quickly, I want to point out the resources section. This provides some additional details and additional resources that were used within the CHAT analysis by individual states. Some state-specific resources for more detailed information on sage grouse or lesser prairie chicken. Some information about the various regional work groups that were put together during the CHAT project, in particular the Habitat for Species of Concern work group and the Native and Unfragmented Habitat work group, which put together a series of regional data sets, and there's more information and technical details on these available here. I won't have time to touch on these in my demonstration, but Audrey Hatch, hopefully, with time permitting, will be able to talk a little bit about these at the end of the webinar. Okay, so we're going to jump over into the map now, just by clicking on that map button. And the first thing that comes up is the disclaimer or splash screen, providing some more information about the intention of the CHAT project, reminding a user that this is a course-scale, non-regulatory wildlife information with the intention to support early planning for a variety of projects, including conservation-related ones. It also points out what version of data that you're currently working with. And since this will be updated on a regular basis, it's good to know what the most recent version is. We click Continue. We now go into the map, and you can see that full extent of that big blue map, as Carly called it during her presentation. We have some navigational buttons in the top left that we can use to zoom into Alaska or the western United States. And for my demonstration, it's going to be kind of focused on a specific area within Oregon. But I do want to point out that all the tools I'm using and everything are available to use across state lines within each of the states. Again, hopefully Audrey will have enough time to touch on a little bit of that towards the end of this webinar. But I really wanted to focus on how you could use this to get some initial information for a project. And the demonstration I'm going to use is an example within the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program, with the idea being that we're going to look at a property for maybe the first time and just kind of give an overview of what kind of natural resources, what kind of crucial habitat might be contained within there. This property is located southwest of Eugene, Oregon. So if we type in Eugene, Oregon into the search box, we then zoom right in. We scroll down to the southwestern part of the city, and we can see right away, adjusting the transparency here, that we do have some most crucial habitat that's showing up. I want to get a better idea of where my project is, so I'm going to lower the transparency so I can see that base map. There's a variety of base maps available here. We're looking at the satellite image. We could also look at streets or terrain. I'm going to stick with the satellite image. And the property that I'm going to look at was actually recently acquired by the Willamette Wildlife Mitigation Program. It's the Coyote Creek South property within the Fern Ridge Wildlife Management Area. But again, for the purposes of this demonstration, we're going to pretend that this is the first time we're looking at this area. There's a series of select tools that you can use, selecting by a shape or selecting by a line. This property follows a creek and a stream, and so it's more of a linear feature, so I'm going to use the select by a line. And just kind of coarsely going through this property, I'm following more of a property description that I have in a hard copy in front of me. And again, I just really want to get a basic idea of what's in this area. So the select tool actually selects the individual crucial habitat polygons, provides some initial selection summary statistics. Right away we can see that the minimum or the most crucial layers that are showing up here are the overall crucial habitat rank, the terrestrial crucial habitat. There's a one for terrestrial species of concern, another one for wetland and riparian habitat, and then even another one for terrestrial species of economic and recreational importance. Some of these fields are currently showing up as blank, which is an error in the website. We're in the midst of fixing that now. I just wanted to point out, and it should be updated as soon as tomorrow even. So if we wanted to keep these results, we could print those and record them. But I really want to figure out exactly what these mean, where these areas are, and get some more information. So I'm going to close that, and stop drawing, and kind of center my project area on the window. Turning the crucial habitat rank back up, I can see, that this most crucial or darkest blue areas in the northern part of my property area that I'm looking at, or project area. I can add additional map layers. And I remembered by looking at that terrestrial species of concern was one. That's also one that I'm interested in for this particular project, to see if there's any potentially endangered species in the area. And also riparian and wetland habitat. This is a riparian area, and I want to know more information about habitat particular to that. So I've now added these three layers all at once. You can hide each of them and kind of look through. Looking at the terrestrial species of concern, we see in that northern part again, we're getting those high, more crucial areas. Just to reiterate, within each of these layers, this is basically just showing a relative relationship. These darker areas are more crucial, the lighter areas are least. And we'll find out more information about exactly what that means when we dig into the metadata here in a little bit. Looking at the wetlands, again, I'm going to bring it up a little bit. In that same area, we have a more crucial or most crucial wetland habitat area, so that's something, it looks like this area is something we want to keep an eye on. Now, one of the things that I want to do now for my project is I want to share this with a coworker. I'm going to add another layer. We have a series of ancillary data layers here in the map layers window. I'm going to look at townships, so that kind of gives some reference. And I have all of these layers turned on. I have my townships turned on, and by clicking this link button, it actually creates a map link, which I can copy, put into an email, put on Twitter, share it through a social network, however I want to do, and it brings up a new map within the chat tool that same disclaimer screen. We have all of those layers we were just working with. We're in that same extent, and it transfers all of that over. Going back to my original map, we could also click the print button, and that actually opens up a printable page, so you can zoom around, turn down particular layers, however you want to work it, and then print that to a hard copy document. So after I've shared that with my coworkers, I want to zero in on this area in particular here. This is where I'm going to turn off the townships. And if I turn this down, that same area is where we're seeing some high crucial terrestrial species of concern. So if I stop my selection and click on an individual hexagon, we can see the data input layers and rank values for each of those within that hexagon. And so that gives us additional detail for that specific area. 9999 represents a null value, or data is not available for that hexagon. There's some details on that here. And there's two additional ways that you can get some more details on the information that's included here directly from this identify box. The first way that I want to show you is by accessing the state-specific pages. This takes you to the Oregon state page. Currently, Oregon does not have a state-specific chat. We are in the process of developing one, and we hope that Compass will be out in the next few weeks. But we do have a link here that takes you to the Department of Fish and Wildlife website, where you can see additional data that may be available or contact information. Just as an example, as Carly said, New Mexico just released their site. So if we were looking at New Mexico and we went to their state page, we would be able to directly go to that state chat and get additional details. Zooming up, or backing up just one layer to the state main page, which is also accessible from up here, we have a list of state technical contacts, so feel free to get in touch with any one of us to get more information on the process or the data that we're using. Back in my original map, back in my identify box, the other way that we can get more details is by looking at the metadata, and clicking that link takes us directly to the State of Oregon metadata page. We can see detailed information on how the crucial habitat rank was assessed, what different priority levels mean. We were looking at that terrestrial species of concern, and in my project area, I'm interested if there's any endangered species that are here. And under priority level 1 for terrestrial species of concern, we have Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife sage grouse core area, which I know they're not in this part of the state. Or it could be a documented observation of a federal threatened or endangered species, a state threatened or endangered species, or an Oregon Conservation Strategy species that has a NatureServe rank of S1. So that kind of information tells me that there is a high priority species in this area. Looking at data sources within the terrestrial species of concern provides a list of all the data that was used in my analysis. And where available, there are links to more information about the particular data layers used. Orbic is the runs the natural heritage program within Oregon, so that takes you to more information about them. And Rachel will be talking more about natural heritage work in Nebraska here in a little bit. We also were looking at wetland and riparian areas. Looking at more information about that, we can see that this is relying on results from analyses performed by the Wetlands Conservancy. And we can see complete results of their work online using the TWC Wetland Restoration Planning tool. And the data source provides a link directly to that tool. So what we're trying to do here is provide a way for people to get more information and details on how the layers were put together, and then you can even get more information and details through the links to individual data sets and projects where available. Backing up just a little bit to quickly show in this data page where we're located here, we can get some more general information about the project, covering acronyms, conservation status. We were just looking at that S1, that's a critically imperiled species. Terminology, definitions for all of the crucial habitat data input layers are available here. There's FGDC compliant metadata for the Western Governor's Crucial Habitat West-wide data set. We can see that here. And that's also attached to the data. So going back to my project example, Now maybe I want to download the data, take it into my system, upload my specific property boundary, things like that. I can do that here, leave my name and email to get more information when there's a data update, or stay informed through an RSS feed. And finally, we can also look at web services, ingest those into an API, or website, a web application, and take advantage of using those directly in my project. So just in conclusion, we kind of started with that project overview. We linked to additional information. We can share that project with coworkers, and then we can download the data and work more with it in our own systems. I'm going to go back to the original map and close out of everything. And next, Rachel will be talking more about the Natural Heritage Program and the work that was done in Nebraska. And just as a background, I'm going to zoom the map over to Nebraska for Rachel's talk. Rachel, are you there? Carly, do you know where Rachel is? Or
Rachel, I'm going to unmute you. You should be able to talk now.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Oh, there you go. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, thank you, Artie. It's great to be here. The co-leads on the chat project here in Nebraska are Rick Schneider and myself. We're with the Nebraska Natural Heritage Program, and we were asked to speak for about 5 minutes on the chat from our perspective as natural heritage staff members. So I'm going to give a little bit of background on heritage programs and discuss their role in chat development. And then second, I will touch on how the chat helps us meet our goals here in Nebraska. So first, a little bit of background. The heritage programs are in every U.S. state. They're in the Canadian provinces and many Latin American and Caribbean countries. And one of our core activities is to collect and manage information on the locations of and the conditions of at-risk species and natural plant communities. And we use standard methods across our network, and these facilitate data sharing. And our efforts are coordinated by a nonprofit called NatureServe. This is a nonprofit conservation organization. In our state, in Nebraska, the Heritage Program is part of our wildlife agency, the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission. So there were no organizational barriers to our working on the project and working with other staff in the agency. It was just a very natural thing to do. But in more than half of the chat states, they operate separately. So it really says a lot, very positive things about the chat development process that most, if not all, in fact, I believe all states did use observational data housed in natural heritage programs. So that's really been a great success. And then second, for prioritizing areas, states also relied heavily on the conservation status ranks that are developed by the network. So Artie just showed a NatureServe S3 rank in some of the metadata. That's an example of a conservation status rank. And a third feature of the chat development that came out of collaboration with the Heritage Network was actually the methodology for combining lots of disparate pieces of information. The approach that was used by most states was based on one used by the Natural Heritage Program in Florida. So that's another example where this collaboration was really effective. So the first take-home message that I want to give you is that natural heritage data, methods, and also the knowledge of the network were really integral to chat development. The second topic I'll address quickly is how the chat helps us at the Nebraska Natural Heritage Program convey our priorities better. A major aspect of our mission here is to disseminate the best available information critical to the conservation of our biodiversity. And this information gets used for all kinds of things, conservation planning and practice, environmental review, and we routinely get information requests from consultants working with developers. And so typically when information goes out to data requesters, we have very little input into how it then gets used. So for example, we leave it to those requesting to decide how to use conservation status ranks or even whether to use them. And we leave it to them to fill in gaps in information. And this is really asking quite a lot of our users. We're kind of asking them to read our minds. So the value of the chat is that the state is making its priorities absolutely transparent, completely explicit, and then is synthesizing all the available data that pertain to those priorities. So the second take-home point I want to leave you with is that users of the chat may not have the same priorities as us here in the Nebraska Natural Heritage Program, in the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission, but at least they know how our priorities fall out across the landscape given the available information. There's always going to be a need for information on individual species, and the chat does not give that species-specific information. So another benefit of the chat for us is that it helps direct users to us here at the Heritage Program. And all of the sources of information are documented. So users are directed to museums, to state wildlife agencies, and nonprofit joint ventures, all of these places that have provided really good information. So I'll just finish here by saying a couple words about the future. It is going to be important to keep the information in the chat current, and it is necessary to improve the information too. It is certainly not perfect. So doing those things is going to require continued investment in field surveys by biologists, and it's going to require continued collaboration between heritage programs and state agencies. So I guess I'm just very happy to say that this first release of the chat demonstrates how valuable that collaboration can be. And with that, I'll turn it back to Carly to introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I'm going to queue up some slides for Carl Zakella, who is the director of the Renewable Transmission Program at the Natural Resources Defense Council. He developed these slides with Byron Wirtz from the Western Energy Coordinating Council. And I don't believe that Byron's on the phone, Carl. So if you wouldn't mind running with this by yourself.
Sure. I'm happy to do that. Byron and I were in a meeting, and he actually has just stepped out, so he's in the process of gearing up. But we only have 5 minutes, so I'm going to jump right in. Basically, first of all, congratulations to everyone who's worked on this. It's a wonderful project. The work that we've been doing at the Western Electricity Coordinating Council on identifying environmental and cultural risks to transmission projects has benefited greatly and will continue to from the interactions we've had with the Western Governors Association and the community of people that have worked on chats. And we want to just talk for a couple of minutes about one of the applications of these data and why they're so important. Next slide. What we're looking at, and you'll see there's some similarities here to what chat has been doing. We're also looking at a high elevation, whereas it's fairly coarse information. We're looking across the Western Electricity Coordinating Council transmission footprint, which incorporates a little bit of Baja, Mexico, and 2 Canadian provinces in addition to the western states. Our goal is to help transmission developers and planners look at transmission in a way that helps us design things that can actually be built in a timely way to facilitate development like renewable energy projects, etc. And the goal is to identify and avoid as much as we can environmental and cultural resource impacts. Now, just like chats, we're not doing NEPA, we're not doing environmental review. What we're doing is a high-level screening to help make NEPA easier. And the chat data factor very prominently into this. Next slide, please. As you can see, we've put in data layers from a variety of different land types and values. Our wildlife data, much of it has come from NatureServe up to this point, and it's been our intention since the beginning of this process several years ago that we would incorporate chat data as they became available. Chat data, because as you've just seen, is very high quality, comes from states It provides a good degree of certainty about what level of concern people have within states about resource values, that it would automatically be incorporated into our data sets as what we call preferred data. These are quality screened embedded bits of information that come into our planning tools. Next slide, please. And this is just one example of how the chat data would enrich the data sources that we've had. And similar to the chat, these data are never going to be perfect. They're constantly going to be improved upon, and every other year we'll be updating them, etc. So as the chat data becomes available, we're going to try to integrate those directly into our geospatial databases so that we can reflect within our risk screens the knowledge that's been accumulated in the chat system. And just a word from our perspective on the collaboration between and among the states. This is so important to us because a lot of what we're looking at is multi-state projects crossing various types of terrains and jurisdictions, and to have a better sense of how state authorities across state lines in a regional sense view these values is incredibly important to us. And as you can see, another similarity that we have with the chat data is that we have a darker to lighter sort of screening on our maps. We also have a data viewer that will incorporate this information and will be fairly consistent. It will be very consistent in its application to the way it's represented, I think, in the chat viewer too. Byron has just gotten here, and he's heard my little spiel, so I'm going to ask him if he has anything else he'd like to add. He's nodded no. So I know we only have a few minutes and there's more people to present to you, so I'll stop there unless there are questions.
All right, thank you so much, Byron, or Carl, sorry, and Byron for joining. We know that both of you have worked really hard and been great partners of chat all along the way, so we're grateful to have your perspective on why this is important to the conservation community. Finally, I'm going to turn it over to Audrey Hatch, who is technical consultant for WGA. She's been with this project definitely longer than me, longer than almost anybody else on this project, and she is very knowledgeable about all things chat. So she's going to wrap up another demo for us here, and take it away, Audrey.
Thank you, Chloe. And I'm going to just check that everyone can hear and see we're back at the blue map. Can everybody do that?
Yep, got it, Audrey.
So I'm going to use the word, I've heard collaboration quite a bit, and I'm going to talk briefly about the relevance of chat to collaborative conservation processes using a kind of a Northwest example, and more specifically how the work through the data development process and launch of the tool gets us better data getting used earlier on in the decision-making process by folks like the WEC that just described that example, and really together this meets our conservation goals. And this is a view, we're zoomed in here to, this is what we call kind of the Tri-Cities area in Washington. This is a corner of the southeastern state of Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. And as Artie mentioned earlier on, I will do my best to quickly talk us through kind of a tri-state example. But in this area, so for reference again, kind of the Tri-Cities area of southeastern Washington, there's a lot of wind energy development happening in this area, and a lot of really large-scale renewable development happening here. So there's a lot of interest in being able to compare crucial natural resources from one state to another along these state lines. There's also a lot of interest in habitat conservation here, some really unique plants, even soil types, animals, habitat types, for example, shrub steppe habitat. And just roughly speaking, this area falls into the Columbia Plateau ecoregion. So just to orient us really quickly back here to the blue map, the crucial habitat rankings that you see reflected here by 3 states, Washington, Idaho, and Oregon. The darker blue indicating you're more likely to find a crucial natural resource here.
the lighter blue meaning you're less likely to encounter what contributes to a crucial natural resource here. And then I want to zoom over to metadata to walk you briefly through a quick example specific to Washington. There's a couple ways you can get some metadata through the map link or just right over here under data, metadata by state. And what I want to point out here is for the state of Washington, crucial habitat includes a detailed terrestrial and a freshwater analysis with many data input layers under each of those. And under the terrestrial crucial habitat, you'll see several data sources, and specifically kind of as comparable to what Artie described, but I think it's really valuable to see the similarities and differences. Terrestrial species of concern are described by conservation status, and there's information on the data sources. In Washington, there is a data source called Priority Habitats and Species Online, and that information is all available here by clicking through the metadata. And also what I wanted to point out here for the state of Washington is a data source under the Wildlife Corridors data category that was completed through some highly collaborative work with the Washington Connectivity Work Group. And just to show you what this looks like, again, just at the a quick overview here, this is back to our TriState view, and I've gone to layers, and I've selected just to show you for now the Wildlife Corridors data layer. And I want to point out these the green areas for the state of Washington are showing where there are wildlife connectivity work groups of focal species connectivity maps that are available, and this is highlighting the kind of the course level patterns and processes that can be seen through this online planning tool here. And so the green are showing you areas where there are connectivity modeled products, and then where the areas are not green, where those models are not present. So back thinking about the metadata page that we just flipped through, that shows you kind of how that product fits into the overall crucial habitat rank for the state of Washington. And then also I wanted to show you, as Artie described earlier, a multi-state example of a data input layer for large natural areas. So these highlighted data input layer categories are kind of given information from the Wildlife Council's white paper. So all states were really charged with getting their best information together to fulfill each of these bold categories here. And so just to show you another example of a different type of data under those categories, this is showing large natural areas in purple, and I'll just toggle off my connectivity layer so you can see the large natural areas in a little bit more clearly. And again, this is useful for really showing the course level patterns revealed by the data sets. And these are the types of patterns that we're finding are really useful to look at in the Crucial Habitat Planning tool. And then I want to give you the reference and the context that you can get more information on these data sets or the underlying data layers through the resources page, and specifically the purple map of large natural areas is available through the resources page. Some of these data layers are available for individual download. And so you'll see that on our map page, in this case, a common data product was used by the Northwest states. It may have been prioritized into the crucial habitat rankings a bit differently based on each state's process. And all of that information is really kind of available in the metadata at the detail where you might want to be able to compare exactly where these different data inputs fit into the crucial habitat rule sets. so really through these kinds of collaborative efforts, including the diverse technical teams and others, have really led to these pretty high-quality products, data sets available for chat. And we see, I think, through those collaborative efforts, the relevance of chat to conservation partners as a core-scale tool using these common definitions and data products, allowing you to compare locations relative to one another and at a core scale, and something that kind of links up very well to state systems and helps put those priorities into context, gives you an entry point and a clearinghouse to bring connectivity information to the public. And so in this way, it's a way to engage with regional partners and federal agencies and give folks a sense of the state's priorities and a common framework for comparing them across the state lines. And so to kind of finish up, I wanted to just show back to our TriState Map area. Again, for reference, here are the sort of Tri-Cities area in Washington. This is the state of Washington on the border with Oregon and Idaho here. And I just kind of zoomed in to show you a quick query that you could do online. And also I wanted to point out that most of the data for crucial habitat ranks was aggregated into a 1 square mile hexagon, but in several cases, states felt like a 3 square mile hexagon was a better level of resolution for depicting their state's priorities. And you'll see this example here shows that Idaho used a 3 square mile level to aggregate their crucial habitat information. Oregon and Washington chose the 1 square mile, so I wanted to zoom in for that reason. And then just kind of roughly this summary of information here that is the similar format to what Artie pointed out earlier. But you can even online kind of quickly look through here and say if one were interested in comparing areas in this area, get a sense of what level of crucial natural resources and a general sense of what types of those resources they would be able to expect to find in that area. So that's a rough comparison, just kind of looking at some of the average values of the data input layers. And this helps with quick comparisons and I think helps to understand what is crucial habitat quickly online. But again, your more detailed analyses are probably best done with a downloaded data set. And I wanted to point out that with that downloaded data set, there is detailed information on each state's prioritization process. And there's also information about the specific species that were included by each state in a list, but it's not in a format that's accessible to know, which species are in which hexagon, but rather it gives you the information about what species are important to each state, and it gives you information about whether they organize their species into a terrestrial species of concern, or a connectivity layer, or an aquatic species of concern, or terrestrial or aquatic species of importance to hunting and fishing. So it gives you that level of information about the species that were included as priorities to each state. So we really wanted, I think, with this demo to highlight how data are being used in chat and highlight how this planning effort really values high-quality data and hope to continue to build that going forward through the state project teams that are charged with evaluating and considering different data inputs. And overall, this project, the goal is to really help folks use that information early in their process for planning or decision makers, and we really want to help folks get the right information at the right time.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey. So this is Carly Brown again.
Audrey, did you have any other things that you wanted to end off with there?
That's what I had kind of prepared as far as a TriState walkthrough of the tool, but I'm happy to be here if we have some time for questions.
Well, absolutely. We do have some time for questions. First of all, I see that Brigitte Flanders, your hand is raised, so I'm going to try to unmute you. Let me see. Actually, I guess I'll just make you a panelist temporarily, Brigitte. Okay. Brigitte, you should be able to ask your question now. Okay, we might have lost Bridget there. We also had some questions come in from participants. One was actually asked twice regarding cross-boundary issues on the crucial habitat ranking. For example, some areas have a higher priority on the crucial habitat scale on one state, and across the boundary, it's a different crucial habitat level, and you can sort of see the borders in this respect for some of the states. So we have this question answered in our frequently asked questions, and this is something that we get a lot, that the seamless nature of the map. The thing that I like to emphasize when this question comes up is that all of the states worked within the same framework as depicted by the Wildlife Council, but they had the flexibility to operate within that framework to reflect the priorities for each state, what crucial habitat meant to them. So because each state had the decision of what data was included and how they approached including that data, you will see a couple of boundary issues. But we think that overall it's a strength of the tool because it reflects what you'll encounter whenever you go and talk to the state wildlife agency about that particular area for a pre-planning project. And also, we think that it's just useful to have all of that information out there for the states to better understand, where they stand and where their neighbors stand, and again, helping facilitate that West-wide dialogue that the Crucial Habitat tool has really helped inspire. All right. I think we also have had a couple other questions. If you'll give me just a minute, and I'll cue them up to our other speakers. Okay, we've also received some questions about whether or not you can see this particular information about particular species within the Crucial Habitat Assessment tool. Audrey, I think that you were speaking a little bit about this before. Actually, I'm going to ask Artie, because Artie has spent a lot of time working on the metadata for the site. Artie, would you mind taking the question about if you would be able to drill down to look at actual species lists within the metadata for a layer?
Yeah, sure. So we do have some species-specific information and links within the website under the resource page for sage grouse and lesser prairie chicken in particular. Most states, at least as much as I have seen, and I even almost want to say all states, are not including specific species information in the metadata. So within the WGA chat site, you really don't have the ability to see specific species, what's been observed or identified within a given hexagon. I believe that some states are looking into having this kind of information, or at least the level of this information, available within their state chats. And that's also where we're encouraging people, this is giving you sort of that 30,000-foot initial look. So the encouragement is really to get in touch with the wildlife agencies within a particular state, let them know that you're looking at this area, it's been marked as a high crucial species of concern area, and then you can get more information from the individual wildlife agencies.
All right, right, we have a couple more questions from attendees. I'm going to go ahead and try to click on you. I'm going to make Christy from Audubon in Washington a presenter to ask her question. Christy, go ahead. I think that the problem is if you're not connected on the phone, then I can't hear you whenever I make you a presenter because your phone isn't, I'm not able to unmute you via the webinar tool. So if you can type in your question or type in the code that was given to you whenever you logged in, I can hear you on the phone. Otherwise, if you'll send the question via the chat mechanism on the site. Peter Williams, I'm going to make you a panelist now and also have the phone problem.
Raise their questions yourself.
Yeah, if you'll just send that question along on the chat mechanism. We've also had a question about the cost of developing the site. Just wanted to say that this was kicked off with a grant from the Department of Energy that was roughly $150,000 per state over 3 years, so about $50,000 a year. But we want to emphasize that the states themselves contributed a lot of staff time and a lot of data collection and put information online that hadn't been online before. So in that way, it's sort of hard to even put a value on all of the work and collaboration that went into this project. So it's hard to put a single number on that. We've also had a question about the regulatory nature of this tool, if it would have any implications for local zoning or for private landowners that don't want any implications for their land. We want to emphasize that this is not a regulatory tool. This is not meant to take over local zoning at all. This is simply a tool that allows for pre-planning processes to get a first look at what the State Wildlife Agency thinks is most crucial under the Western Governors Wildlife Council's definition of crucial. So that is not meant to have a regulatory implication, and in fact the core scale of the tool makes at a 1 square mile resolution at the absolute finest, and going up to a 3 square mile or 10 square mile, all of that makes it really hard to create regulatory implications out of that, particularly for private property, because it's too coarse to say that all of it is considered crucial. So we do not think that it will have regulatory implications. All right, are there any other questions? Okay, we have a question about the data that has been provided by individual state fish and wildlife agencies. I'm going to ask Audrey again to take that question about sort of the variety of data, including state data, but also outside state data.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Carly. You're just looking for kind of an overview of the data resources included here, data sources?
Yeah, I know that states have included a lot of data, but I know there's also been some outside data sets. So can you speak to that a little bit, Artie, and then maybe Audrey can follow up?
Yeah, certainly. So my work centered on the work done in Oregon, and we really took advantage of this project to work on getting our own data in a better managed format, centralized data sets and standardized data sets, and start putting a lot of effort into that, or continue putting more effort into that. But we also looked at including as many outside data sources as we could and for this initial version, and are excited about including more in future versions and updates. Within the metadata by state section, one of the things we really wanted to make sure we were doing was providing details on what data sources are being used in each particular layer. So you can see on your screen right now, this is a compiled, the terrestrial crucial habitat rank is a compiled data set. So you'd have to look at the input data layers. But if you scroll down and click on any one of those, you would be able to see the actual specific data sources that are used within that analysis. So that gives you an idea. You can see there's some ODFW data, and then also we're including Natural Heritage Program data. In other layers, we're including some other state data layer sources. We work with some federal sources. Different states are all going to have different data sources and incorporate a variety of within state and out of state sources. But you can see all of that within the metadata and then provide links to more information wherever possible. Audrey, anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, thanks. I would emphasize, Artie, just what you said, that, and just add that throughout this project, I think a phrase that got used quite a bit was as regionally consistent as possible. So there are many common data sources, and data from the Natural Heritage Network was one that I would say was a common data source, but it was actually sourced through each state. But then there are other layers, such as the large natural area, the purple blobs that I showed, that were offered to states to consider, and then states could either provide all their own source data or use some of those regional products or a combination to meet the kind of these orange category headings. So every state will have done, gone through a process to vet and consider data to meet these data categories. And their actual data sources may vary a bit depending on what they have available to them. But we really just try to get as regionally consistent as possible. And then I would add one thing, which is if one were to download the crucial habitat data layer, you also do get a large Excel spreadsheet that includes all of the detailed data sources of the states, and it also includes a list of species just by state, not by hexagon. So that's available as well as supporting documentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Audrey and Artie. We have two more questions I'm gonna kick to. We do have a little bit extra time saved on this webinar. If you have to log out, I suggest that any questions you have, please email me at cbrown@westgov.org. Virginia Seamster, you have a question and you are unmuted.
Hi, Carly. Thanks. I think Audrey just answered my question. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Virginia. I am unmuting another participant, Monica Tomosi from the U.S. Forest Service. Monica, you should be unmuted.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. I was wondering if any of this has been published in a scientific journal.
No, we have not published in a scientific journal. We just launched on Thursday, so as far as I know, we haven't been approached by any academic groups or anyone else that would hope to study this and publish it in a scientific journal. Again, this is state data, and so it has been vetted through the state's internal data process, but we don't have any formal academic outreach.
Okay. Just to add a little bit, Carly, to amend a little bit on that, with the work group that produced native and unfragmented habitat specifically had some university connections throughout the process, and also some experts from conservation groups and some experts from the Washington Connectivity Group as well. And I believe there may have been some common, some of the products that were used in that work group that were also used by academics, perhaps in some other work. And I know there have been some poster presentations at the ESRI conference about this data set specifically. But I agree, I don't think there's anything on the crucial habitat process that has been published specific to WGA.
Thanks, Audrey. We just received another question. If this webinar will be available after we finish up here, and the answer is yes. It will be available at westgov.org, along with our other webinars. We've had an energy-focused webinar. We've had just a general webinar. I'd also mention that we're going to have a transportation-focused webinar coming up in January. We haven't nailed down a date for that, but we will be posting information on our website and to our mailing list. And we'll probably have another webinar or two along the line in January, so keep an eye on westgov.org if for no other reason than to send this along to your colleagues. The webinar, we've been asked if it's going to be available as a podcast. It will just be available as a regular webinar. And you can see on the webpage right now that Learn About Chat slide that will link you to the webinars. I'd also note that my email, cbrown@westgov.org, you can email me in order to get signed up for WGA's email list, and I will put you on our wildlife-specific email list so you can get more updates about those webinars as time passes. Well, I don't have any more questions popping up for me here, and I just want to take this time to thank my panelists and guests. Thank you so much to Carl Zakella and Byron Wirt from NRDC and WEC, the Environmental Data Task Force. Thank you also to Rachel Simpson from the Nebraska Natural Heritage Program, to Audrey Rodriguez from Oregon, and to Audrey Hatch, WGA's technical consultant. And thank you all guests for joining us. Please again email me cbrown@westgov.org or visit the site at westgovchat.org. Thanks, and bye.